everyone for joining us for today's webinar on Person Centered Strategies Consultation Service Part 2, where we'll be walking through a sample situation today, as well as fielding questions that you may have as related to that. Couple keeping items before I turn it over to today's presenters. Line is muted upon entry. However, safety first, we suggest that you go ahead and mute your line as well. If you have questions regarding the content presented today, if you will please put those in the Q&A box. If you have questions regarding sound or something technical with the webinar platform, I'll do my best to help you with that. If you can submit those type of questions through the chat box. As said, I am going to turn it over to our presenters today, Dr. Terri Rodgers and Rhiannon Evans, and I will let them tell you a little bit more about themselves and get started with today's presentation.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. This is Terri Rodgers. I'm the Chief Behavior Analyst and the owner and operator of Person Centered Strategies Consultation Service in the Medicaid waiver. So I'm going to be with Evans, who is coordinator of Tiered Supports, the statewide coordinator of Tiered Supports. We're going to be walking through an example of providing Person Centered Strategies Consultation Service. So this webinar today presumes that you have participated in Part 1. And so either in person in Part 1 or you go back and listen to the recording of Part 1, and that's still fresh in your head. So that's true. We'll do a brief review, and then we'll go into the situation. So if you have questions about our content, Q&A, questions of technology is in the chat box. Let's get started. So Person Centered Strategies Consultation is a service that is designed to help the support team implement better at preventative, teaching-based strategies that improve quality of life for the individual. This is not a direct service. This is an indirect service, okay? So let's go to the polling question. There'll be polling questions throughout. Please answer this polling question to help us know how prepared you are, who's on board, and what kinds of things we might need to emphasize. Thank you very much for participating in the poll. It's very helpful for us, and it's helpful for you to have an interactive presentation versus one where you are just passive listening. You don't get much out of it, and you probably get tempted to surf the internet and chat with your friend and all those kinds of things. So that obviously is defeating the purpose of having a webinar. So with this question, we had a good move of answers be none of the above. So for those folks that indicate none of the above, could you, in the Q&A box, please, 2 to 3 words, define your role in the system, or interest in attending this webinar. So those 9 folks or 7 folks who didn't answer, could you please type in the Q&A box what your role is, that was in the answers above, or what your interest is in this webinar. Thank you. Okay, so answering that's great. This is awesome. I'm so happy that I asked you to write this in, because it's exactly the folks that I really would like to have know more about this service. So we have MMAC auditor who wants to learn more about the service, which is awesome, because they have a critical role in closing the loop and making sure our services are what we want them to be. And we have a couple of TCM TACs who provide technical assistance to support coordination agencies. So it's great because they'll be able to better direct those support coordination agencies in how this service might be useful for their support teams. A UR coordinator, which is great, and a couple of people who are interested in perhaps providing this service. So that's also great. Thank you so much. Okay, so I wanted to be participating in this webinar, are participating in the webinar, and that's great. I hope you find it useful. So today we're going to go through an example situation and apply the environmental evaluation. We're going to review some action plan and goals from this situation and some ways to measure if this action plan is working, and discuss recommendations you might make to the support team if you're providing this service about strategies that are going to improve the quality of life for the individual. And then we're going to discuss the service expectations and how to assist that support system use the strategies as suggested on an ongoing basis. So that's our lofty goal for today. A little bit of a review. So the PSC service is, as I said, person-centered. It's to help our whole system be more person-centered, to help our whole system utilize positive supports, to be preventative and proactive, to be constructive or teaching-based, to look at system strategies, not the PCSC providing direct implementation with the individual being served, but looking at that individual support system and how that system can implement strategies. Because it's a consultation, not a therapy or an ongoing service. That's very important because it wouldn't work the way we want it to if someone needed PCSC for long periods of time. So those are important things. We have Jen. So here's a polling question. Based on your current understanding of this service, is it true or false? All right, was one of those difficult written in the narrative questions that hopefully you were able to parse out. But the PCSC service is not a service that should be adding restrictive strategies into the ISP. You do not be doing restrictive strategies through the PCSC service. It is not a service to utilize so that you can justify or use restrictive strategies in the individual support plan. It is a positive, proactive, constructive, teaching-based, person-centered service, so that's quality of life. So none of those things say restrictive. So if you got that, and that's awesome, and hopefully if you have a concern about that, you can write that in the Q&A box if you don't understand that. But by definition, this service is not restrictive strategies. Just a review of the essential elements. The outcome that we're looking for with this service is improving quality of life for the individual. The outcomes for the service are getting the support system to use strategies that are going to improve quality of life for the individual. So identifying problems with the support system and how it's working now, and changes that need to be made so that they are implementing positive, proactive, and preventative teaching-based strategies. So those are the outcomes that we're looking for. And some elements of this service, if you look at the service definition, are that you might make modifications to the environment or lifestyle. Help a support team figure out how to do that so that the individual's quality of life is improved. Maybe you're not morning people, and so you try to adjust the schedule of the day so that things happen later in the day. Maybe they aren't evening people, so you try to adjust things so they happen earlier in the day. Those kinds of modifications to the environment. There should be an implementation plan for the strategies, including the environmental and lifestyle modifications that the team should be implementing. There should be training for the support team to learn the strategies and learn how to implement the plan. And there's short-term coaching for the support team for the implementation of those strategies. So all of these things are essential elements. And what PCSC is and is not. So it's not a direct therapy service. It does not involve teaching activities with an individual or counseling with an individual. If the individual needs those things, that would be something that comes from somebody else, but the PCSC might identify that need. It is not implement behavior support plans or implement punishment or restrictive strategies. And it's an ongoing service. So if there's staff turnover, part of that plan that the PCSC and the team develop is how to sustain the system using those strategies after the PCSC is gone. So who's going to be training the staff when the PCSC is not there anymore? So a justification for the PCSC service would not be turnover, so I need to train more staff, because you could have built it into the system and into the plan who trains staff after the PCSC is gone. B, brief interviews with the individual and or briefly demonstrating with the individual the strategies. So demonstrating to the support team and the individuals there, because she is part of that demonstration. It is addressing variables and strategies that make a good life and a positive environment in cooperation with other types of service providers. So whoever's involved in that support team would be involved in the assessment and also in developing the plan. It's a service that should be assisting the support team to identify and learn how to use positive person-centered strategies, and it should help the support team develop a way to maintain use of strategies and continue to train staff and themselves. Brief review about what are positive supports. There's a really fine set of trainings available that we've developed supports. There are YouTube links. If you need those, you can send me an email, and I'll send those to you. Really, 4 YouTube videos that discuss positive supports and what they are. But just a brief review: positive means add, so they're add good things. They should result in improving quality of life. They should increase skills and independence, because you're adding skills and independence for the individual. You're doing things that are going to promote the individual's potential. So it's not just to withhold meanness. You have to actually add extra good in to be positive. It focuses on desirable actions, and positive supports have a high ratio of pleasant and caring interactions, a very high ratio. So if you say you're doing positive supports, it should be characterized by these things. And positive supports are not restrictions or limitations. They are not saying no. They are not focusing on elimination of desirable behaviors, because what you're focusing on is the development of desirable behaviors. It's not positive just to say good job. So praise is not enough to say that it's positive. Not ignoring desirable actions because you're too focused on the undesirable actions. Again, it's not focusing on undesirable. It's not placing unnecessary demands, and it's not using coercive. So just to us, what is positive supports and what is not. Okay. One things that you're paying attention to in person-centered strategies are the things that improve quality of life, or the social health. That's how the CDC and the public health system and the mayor environment are talking about these. So these are the domains that are identified as public determinants of health for you, and they're operationalized. And all of these things are variables that we can try to impact to improve quality of life. So you're wondering, what am I supposed to be doing to improve quality of life? It's not just taking them out ice cream every night and letting them watch videos all night. It's working these kinds of domains to them more independent, more involved, more valued in the community, paying attention to health, all those kinds of things. So that's a review. Okay. The Strategies Consultation Service has a little bit of a different kind of assessment as the basis for the service. All of our services should have a baseline assessment of need, and then the plan of intervention is based on that assessment. In the Person-Centered Strategies Service, you're evaluating the system, how it's supporting the individual towards improving their quality of life. You're looking for barriers, you're looking for consistent use of strategies, you're looking for things to address those domains we just looked at. And I'm going to share with you a potential tool that you are welcome to use. Of course, not required to use, but you are required to have this evaluation and a report of that evaluation. So I'm going to suggest that you might as well use the one that we've developed, because then you don't have to develop your own. But again, you don't have to use this one, you just have to have an evaluation. If you're using our environmental evaluation tool, what you do is an active interview, not hand somebody the tool and ask them to fill it out, not ask those questions from the tool directly. But you have a conversation with people and ask, what does the person doing with whom? How often do they do it? How do you know what they want? Where would you like to live? These are going to sound familiar because we've got a number of ways in our system that we've been trying to work on quality of life. And this service is used when there's a situation where all the things that we've done before, the HCBS survey, any kinds of ASP strategies or discussions, just haven't been enough, and need a little bit of extra help, an outside person coming in to consult with the team. And so there's a lot of these things that are not unfamiliar to you, but the team a little bit of help in developing those strategies to better improve quality of life. So you're going to ask these kinds of questions. How are you keeping track of progress? How do you determine what she needs to learn? How do you know, staff or mom, if you've done a good job? How does the individual know if he's done a good job? What's their health like? When was the time they saw a dentist? How did that go? Are they taking any medication? So you're going to just ask some information gathering questions about aspects that you can think of that might apply to the domains of health that we just went through. And then you're going to come up with your assessment results and recommendations. So, there are some that you're going to be looking for, and there are many more than these, but these are some barriers that we can impact through this service. If the individual has multiple changes in placement or multiple changes in support teams, if they currently are experiencing this, or if they've had it in their past, or if they're new to that situation, then that's a barrier to quality of life, because having good, positive, nurturing relationships is one of the essential elements. It can overcome many of the other barriers if the person has positive relationships in their life. And if they don't, then one of the primary things we need to help the team to do is to increase those nurturing interactions, those positive interactions, so that that kind of relationship can develop. So you're looking for, are staff familiar with the individual's needs and wants? Has the training, and is there oversight of staff to ensure that they're using the strategies that are identified in the ISP? Training alone, what we're doing now, is not enough to get you to do this. I am back to look behind your service notes to see if you're doing it. I need the support coordinator to be following along with the service to see if the support team is implementing what you've recommended. All these things are essential to making sure that the training takes. So is that in place in the support system? We that have become disconnected from their family and friends because of the frequency of moves, because of the search for a provider, and the one that's willing to take them is far away, and now they don't have contact with their family and friends. So the things the support team has to do is help the person to reconnect and help that to become a healthy relationship. As it can Skype, it can be phone calls, it can be taking them to visit, it can be whatever it takes to reestablish that family and friend connection. Routines or lack of routines, a chaotic day, not being able to anticipate what's happening, not a rigid schedule, but there has to be some kind of routine that the individual comes up with the support of their team. It helps to structure their day so they can predict what's happening. Predictability is important. For them, because of economic contingencies, to do things that they like to do, and there has been a lot of effort in figuring out what else could be available that's easy and cheap. That's a good problem. So there's a number of ways that we need to work on that. One, we need to figure out easy and cheap things. Two, we need to help them become more economically stable through employment. So those are things we need to do. If you have a lack of a limited number of choices, if you're expecting that they must adapt or conform or compromise all the time, and have meaningful choices, that's going to be a barrier to their quality of life. If supporters are unable to or inconsistently using the strategies of support, or if there's not a way to promote implementation of those strategies, if database decision-making is not happening, we have a problem with quality of life, because it's going to be there. if you don't have all of those things in place. And have evidence of use of coercion or restrictions, then that's impacting quality of life. So those are some barriers you're looking for when you do your evaluation. So I'm going to look at my Q&A before we go into the situation, and we have a question that says, how long is too long for the service to be in place? For the most part, and again, anytime I make a generalization, I'm always wrong, because it's a generalization, and there could be an outside extreme situation where you'd need the service to continue beyond the plan year. So you've implemented it sometime in one plan year, and it needs to continue beyond that plan year. Perhaps it got implemented 3 months before the plan year ended, and so now you have to extend it to the next plan year. That would be a reasonable thing to do. But I would say more than a year, and the person who's doing the service is either active or the support team is unwilling to implement it. You've got a whole bigger problem than can be by the Person Centered Strategies Consultant. So at that point, you need to be looking beyond why are we having to continue this because it's not effective. In generation, but that's generally what I would be looking at. Okay, so Rhi is going to read for you a situation, an example situation, and then I'm going to have you score our environmental evaluation. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that you take notes on anything that you find important in this So this is of your observation and interviews of a number of team members and the individual in a situation. So we're going to read that to you. It's 2 pages. So take notes because we're going to be using that information in a minute.
All right, here's our example for Sammy. Different staff were observed and interviewed, and the program manager was also interviewed along with Sammy. One member just came to work after finishing a shift at another home. He reported being very tired and made some statements about the company scheduling him unfairly. Another staff person didn't interact with anyone much and made very little eye contact with me as the interviewer. He reported he did not like talking to people. An ISL situation with 2 roommates. One has a community job and is mostly independent in his daily needs. He doesn't need to hang around the house or with his roommates unless there are transportation issues. During one of the observation times, and when he came in the house, he didn't greet anyone except for the staff person on duty. Sammy said hi to him, but there was no response. The inmate is very dependent on staff as he has significant wheelchair. He was difficult to understand, and while he was friendly and attempted interacting with Sammy, Sammy said he didn't like him, like a baby, and everyone takes too much time with him. Sammy was able to answer most questions if they were concrete, and was difficult to understand, and happy to spend time with me. The home one staff person on, and some of the program manager comes to cover when someone has an appointment that the others can't go to, such as a doctor's appointment. Sammy's mother, who lives far away, staff report in Sykeston, and can only visit at Christmas time. He's dealing with his day program and usually goes to Walmart with staff and his roommate once a week. He doesn't church, club, or volunteer activities. No friends outside of his day program. Sam goes to the day program 3 days per week from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. No income other than his $30 that he gets a month. He has a friend who does not contact him. He doesn't participate in his ISP meeting. Country music, he has an iPod and headphones, which he uses most of the day. He'll sit and watch TV, but does not have any favorite shows, which is reported by Sammy and staff, several psychotropic medications. There's no record keeping about those medications or the effects. Starts that they are supposed to write in the daily log notes if any problem is seen or the person doesn't feel well, going to tell the program manager. Staff medications were for aggression and agitation. It shows he was aggressive. He had a roommate in a previous ISL. There's indication of an intensity or frequency of those episodes. Currently, he yells at his roommate in chair frequently and has threatened staff with calling the police because they are mean to him. Sammy sees a physician every 3 months, mainly for medication reviews. He has no health issues reported to staff, Sammy, or in his ISP. His medication side effects include constipation and dry mouth. He sometimes does have problems going to the bathroom. We see house rules posted in the kitchen. 1, do not make a mess in the kitchen or any other part of the home. 2, do not eat anyone else's food. 3, do use the stove or microwave without supervision. Do not make noise after 9 p.m. If you don't do your chores, you cannot go on outings. Do not use bad language or act rudely to anyone. Do phone calls longer than 5 minutes or use the phone after 9 p.m. Do not enter a person's room or use another person's belongings. If you break something, you pay for it. Do not be disrespectful to staff. Positive and negative interaction ratio observations were conducted. During the first minutes, staff Sammy and one of his roommates were home. The other roommate was at work. He was in the living room watching Judge Judy. Staff were in and out of the living room during the observation. There were no interactions with Sammy. He told the roommate to leave Sammy alone. Other interactions between staff and either Sammy or the roommate were observed. The situation occurred in the late afternoon when both roommates were home and there was one staff person present. The staff in the dining room, which is connected to the living room, Sam walking around and seemed unhappy. Staff reported he wanted to go to Walmart earlier, but was unable to go as there was no one to stay with the roommate who didn't want to go, and the staff car would not accommodate a wheelchair and both men. Staff interacting with the working roommate when he came home. They had a brief conversation about work. Staff prompted Sammy to leave the kitchen and to stop complaining. Also gave the other roommate 2 directions to complete a chore and ADL. No other interactions occurred. The observed negative ratio was 1 to 5, so 1 positive to 5 negative interactions. Sammy had a goal for Sammy to use coping strategies instead of getting angry and to learn to make a sandwich. Staff report they are supposed to teach to calm down, but no special direction for doing this. A goal for Sammy to make lunch for himself once a week is in place. The ISL doesn't have any common teaching plans or goals. The agency has a mission on the program manager business card. No person was able to tell me this mission statement or what it meant to them. There's a schedule process for Sammy to arrange his day or notify staff what he would like to do. They're chosen by the roommates. It's described that staff give options and they vote on it. Both reported that they have never recognition of doing good work. They talk to their supervisor when getting this week's schedule and usually see the supervisor on Thursdays when the schedule and paychecks are distributed. The staff with the supervisor and each other mainly through the daily log. They do not have any other data system other than the medication log. He reported a variation of the following when asked what their main responsibility was: keep people here safe and make sure they don't get in trouble, send their medications, and take them places.
So that is a conglomerate of a number of different situations that I'm familiar with. I did not exaggerate or make anything up. I did combine situations, though. So usually it's not so clear, but there's a lot to work with in this situation that can improve Sam's and his roommate and the staff's quality of life. So let's see how you would score things. If you listen to webinar 1, you're familiar with the environmental evaluation tool. Here's a quick review of the situation, just in case you didn't when you were taking notes. So he lives in an apartment. He receives ISL services from South Agency. He and his roommates have not been getting along and are complaining to the program manager. The PSC completed an environmental evaluation and generally found there was very little positive interactions or positive relationships. The schedule was very basic and boring with little choice. All the individuals living in the apartment complained about each other, and staff, and complained about being bored. Staff really nagged, gave directions, and tried to ignore the grumbling of these individuals, but not complaining and grumbling to each other and to the program manager. The expectations were not formally determined, and the individuals didn't have a say in these anyways, so the house rules. All people interviewed stated that the expectations and goals for the home were to stay out of trouble and leave everybody else alone. So that's my elevator description of the Sammy situation. Okay, so here's the tool. So the first thing we're going to look at are essential needs, because if you don't have your essential needs taken care of, your quality of life is not very good. So here's how I would have scored this. This is a snapshot, not an in-depth evaluation. So in my snapshot of what I looked at, did I see that the individual see a physician regularly? And I answered yes, because he had appointment every month. I'm not really thrilled about the quality of that appointment, but an appointment every 3 months. So 2 means all the time, it's 100% they got this in place. 1 means it's partial, and 0 means not there at all. So the individual have a dentist that performs regular checkups. They have a dentist. They see him once a year. Regular checkups is questionable. So, I get my teeth cleaned twice a year, and that's what my dentist recommends. So it's not quite there with the standard of health that we would want. They with chronic health issues. I scored a 1 for that because of the constipation that he reports, sometimes having difficulty with his going to the bathroom. And the health checkup every 3 months is doing a good thorough health checkup because the relationship about the psychotropic meds. That is a 1. I didn't see any other health practices happening. There's not teaching about good diet. There's not regular exercise being promoted or made easy or reinforced. So all the other social determinants of health around health are pretty weak in that place. So that's why I put 1. Does he or less psychotropic medications? Nope, he's on several, so that's a 0. Is someone monitoring the side effects? Nope, so that's a 0. Is there a way of evaluating the effect of the medication? So he's on the medications for aggression and agitation. Are we keeping track of aggression, agitation, ease of calming that's going to say those medications are working? No, we're not formally keeping track of that. So that's a 0. And is there a system to prevent medication errors? Kind of, at least they're doing the mark hard and they're noting that they gave medications. But is there effort extra to make sure that medication errors aren't happening? I didn't see it in my check, so I gave it a 1. My total score for essential needs was 5 out of 14, which says there's probably room to make improvements in some of these. Okay. Next slide. Social environment. This is information that you're looking at. Is it a good environment? Is it pleasant? Those kinds of things. Are primary needs being met? So there is food and shelter. The relationships are not positive, so there's not effort made around being positive with the roommates, with the staff, with family, so I gave that a 1. Environment is sort of pleasant and comfortable, but it's pretty weak on things for him to do. He's got his iPad and the TV. Other 1. Does the individual have interesting activities available in the home? Other than the iPad and the TV, there's nothing else interesting, and there's no promotion of other things, so I gave that a 0. Are people comfortable for the home? Kind of, except they're not comfortable with each other, and so I gave 1. And are the housemates compatible, or do they get along? I gave that a 0. So there's 3 out of 10 for the physical social environment. Positive interactions and relationships, obviously tons of improvement here. I didn't see the positive and negative observations was 1 to 5, so it's mostly a coercive environment. They're not doing anything to improve relationships formally. Care providers are not happy and positive, and maybe it was only the 2 that I looked at, but that's the 2 that are working with the individual, so I scored that a 0. They're modeling appropriate and desirable social skills because they're grumbling to each other, and they're interacting once every 10 minutes. So that is a big area that needs improvement, with 0 out of 10 points. Okay. So now that you see the kind of flow of how these things are sorted and evaluated, and again, you're just doing a quick snapshot. This isn't an in-depth of every element evaluation, but based on what you heard discuss in her observations, what I'd like for you to do is quickly think about how you would score 1 through 6, write it down on a spare piece of paper, and then I want you to, in the Q&A box, write in your total score for this section. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes. As soon as you have a total score, write it in the Q&A so I can keep track of how many folks are done. And think about the SAMI situation and how you would score this. several of you answer, and I really appreciate that because it helps me see if I'm getting my message across, and if you understand. That's the only way you can tell if training is making an effect. So I really appreciate that. And I also really appreciate that most of you were much harder than I was. I would much rather an evaluation score on the harder on the system than easier on the system, because harder on the system means you have stuff you can work on for improvement. And if you score easier on the system, then you're going to let stuff go that could make a big difference. So I appreciate that, and let's see how I scored it now. Okay, the individual communicate readily with care providers, and I scored it a 2. You might have scored that a 1 because you thought that he was sometimes difficult to understand, and you didn't see communication happening, and that would have been perfectly fine. I can justify a 1 in that situation, and probably as I'm talking about it, I would have changed my score to 1. Is someone around who can understand the individual? Well, there's staff always around, so I scored it a 2, but again, I could have scored that a 1 because he's sometimes difficult to understand. Are communication strategies being taught? No. Because nothing's been taught that we can tell except for maybe making a sandwich. The individual have opportunities to make choices, including the choice not to do something, sort of, because all the roommates vote on the activities. That's why I did that, but I certainly could have easily seen a 0 in that situation because I'm not sure a lot of choice making chances observation, so I could see a 0 in that one. In an individual, can enjoyable activities occur even when the individual has made a choice not to do something? Well, if you count listening to his iPod, which is what I did, again, I could see you scoring a 0 there, and they're not alternative activities. So I had that environment 6 out of 12. Many of you did much lower than that. Remember, I had you write in your total score in the Q&A box. So there wasn't a point question. It was right in your total score. I have a couple more of those. So the questions about how I scored, this is some subjective. Yes, it is. But you have an independent person doing PCSC and not the support team doing PCSC, because the support team is not going to be able to see the forest for the trees. So you score yourself well or accurately on this, and that's why you want an independent person doing this service. Okay, next slide. Okay, schedule and predictability and meaningful day is an area that had very low score for me. Most three items had a 0, so there didn't seem to be following of a natural routine. The individual didn't have personally meaningful activities. Maybe they didn't even know what those would be. There wasn't efforts to explore them. He'd have 2 or more leisure activities or hobbies because we're looking for active leisure activities, not passive leisure activities, and he only had passive. There seemed to be a way the person knew other than going to Walmart or bowling at his day program or going to the day program, so that's why I scored those as a 1. Let's see, what's the other one? Oh, does the individual participate? He goes bowling, so I gave him a 1. I scored that schedule and predictability as a 3 out of 12. That would be an area I would really spend some time trying to develop strategies for the team to improve that area for him. I think lots of Sammy's aggression, agitation, and irritation with roommates is around bored, and they all said they were bored. So I would spend some time on that one. All right, so there's a chance for you to score the systems of reinforcement or recognition for everyone. Remember, I want you to, on a scrap piece of paper, score each of these, and then in the Q&A box, write in your total. All right. So I'm going to go over how I scored it, and thank you all for writing in your totals. So systems reinforcement, I gave them 1 point out of a possible 10 because there's really nothing happening much for staff or for the individuals. Then there's not a lot of obvious punitive consequences or punishment consequences. So they're not obvious. They're not there because there's not a lot of or system there. So I'm not confident enough to score that a 2. I gave it a 1. But this is another area I would spend a lot of time developing for this agency. I think the staff could become much happier people if they had a system of recognition, if they knew what their expectations were, if their supervisor or coach in that system was giving them feedback frequently, and there was a lot of reinforcement, and it was being modeled how to do that with the individuals, and the individuals had some recognition happening from staff and even more frequent interaction alone from staff. I think things could be a lot happier in that home and a lot better outcome and quality of life. So just a little side note here, with 6 minutes left, I'm going to go ahead and finish this whole presentation, which is probably going to take another 20 minutes. If you have to hop off at the hour mark because of that's how much time we schedule it and that's how much time you have on your schedule, that's fine. Go ahead and hop off. We're going to record the whole session, and if you hop off, you can come back to that recording and listen to the end part of it. But we're going to finish this whole presentation so that the whole training is completed. So, okay, next part of the evaluation is, are we teaching and encouraging new skills? So one social determinants of health is that there's lifelong learning in place, that you're getting more independent, you're improving on things, that you're being stimulated with an interesting environment and new kinds of activities. And one of the things that we're charged to do in the Medicaid waiver system, and as people who support individuals with developmental disabilities, is we're charged with consistently working on improvement in getting them more independent, reaching and promoting their highest potential. So teaching and encouraging new skills is an essential part of quality of life, and it's also an essential part of our service system, and I don't see any of it. So I scored a 0. So actually this would be something that I would be working on. The roommates could use how to get along with each other and how to problem solve. Sammy could use some leader skills that are going to be more interesting. He probably could use being ready for employment or exploring employment options. So there's a lot of teaching that could happen in this environment. Okay, next slide. So one of the things we look at is it predictable? Do you know what you're supposed to do? Do you know what is going to make you successful in this environment? Are we teaching those expectations? Are they defined? So this is another place for you to score the situation that we have with Sammy. How would you score this? Write in your total response. It's going to give you about a minute to score. I don't think it'll take you very long. Okay, so right on target with me. Not being taught, and nobody really knows what they're supposed to be doing. So I scored 0. Some of you may have found that there was a 1 in there someplace, but almost all of you said this is an area of big improvement because it was at no more than 2 points were. I'm going to be looking for teaching desirable behaviors. That's one of the things I'm going to be trying to teach. I'm going to try the system to identify and teach desirable behaviors, teach Sammy what to do instead of being aggressive, teach Sammy what to do instead of being agitated, teach the staff how to recognize and how to teach. I'm going to have all of those rules removed and have the roommates figure out how they want their selves to be in their home and how to state those more positively, how they want their staff to interact. I'm going to have the agency to do expectations that are positively stated for staff. Of course, everything's open for negotiation, and that's to be one of the skills that's taught and reinforced and recognized. And the caregivers are going to have expectations. And probably going to be really worked on with the roommates. What do you expect your caregivers to do? Because that's who should be defining that. So that's an area that I'm going to be working on if I'm doing PCSC. So data decision making, you can't know if what you're doing is working if you don't take data. You can't know if the medications are working if you're not taking data on the systems. You can't know if your staff are doing what they're supposed to do if you're not observing and taking data. And I didn't see any data of anything other than the informal notes, and that's not data. So that's something I'm going to be working on with this system. So the total score in all of these areas in our evaluation, optional needs being met, I gave this situation 8 of 34 for the essential needs being met. For reliability, I gave them a 10 out of 34. So predictable environment, people aware of things that are supposed to happen, opportunity for choices, use of reinforcement. None of that's reliable in the homes. There was a little bit of it, so there's room for improvement there. And we're not working on development of the individual, reaching their potential, ends of instruction, or those kinds of things. So that was a 0 out of 26. So where we go with Sammy? Question. Based on a brief description and your imagination of other situations that are similar, what might be areas of improvement that a PCSC could focus on to assist this agency in improving the quality of life of the individual. A large portion of you guys who've answered the question. So based on this description, what are some things that you might be trying to work on the system for? So you'll notice I'm not saying work on SAMI. So this is not an individual evaluation. This is an evaluation of the system. A is establish a system of discipline for the individuals and staff to make them stop complaining. Well, if you remember what our description of what is positive and what is not positive, we will be working on a system of recognition for individuals and staff to help them to get along better and to problem solve, but we wouldn't be working on stopping complaining because that's not positive. So without lookmates and more positive staff, gosh, I have something in between time because there's lots of room for things that we can work on here, and I hope we don't jump to change people where they live and changing providers at first option. Help supervisors and staff to clarify the on-the-job expectations and how to interact with each other and the individuals would be one of the primary things that I would be working on this system. So my answer would be C in the situation. Now Rhea is going to walk you through an example of an action plan that I would want to see put in place for this system to changes that are going to improve quality of life.
All right, so the first step in designing your action plan would to look at the objectives and goals for the PSC from the ISP. So goals designed around this would be to increase the positive and negative interactions between staff and SAMI. Right now it's at 1 positive to 5 negative interactions. For a healthy relationship, we look at least having 4 positives to 1 negative. So reversing where they're at right now. We want to establish clear and positive expectations, reinforce staff and SAMI meeting those expectations. So for staff, having clear expectations of what those interactions might look like, and then reinforcing staff for complete goal. And also SAMI, right now the current House rules are all stated as do nots. And so we see what is it do you want to see from SAMI? What do you want SAMI to do? Teach him some skills on how to avoid problems and then reinforce him for using those skills. Staff support and training on identifying and adding meaningful activities to SAMI's daily schedule, things that he might enjoy more than listening to God. Next slide. So underneath all of those main overarching goals, you'll have more achievable steps to work on. And so some of your action steps might be to teach the supervisor and program managers to make positive and negative interaction observations. And then your timeline status of this will be completed by May 15th. So not a date, an achievable date to have this action step completed by, and then who is responsible for completing the action step. So if staff aren't already trained in tools of choice, one thing you might do is for your action step goals, staff will attend tools of choice training. You might be able to send all of your staff. So you might say 50% of my staff will attend tools of choice training, be completed by April 2019. Provide coaching for that, which would be completing observations and giving staff feedback on site when they're seen using tools of choice training.
So each is going to have sub-goals underneath them. So for goal number 3, staff will learn how to increase the positive and negative ratio, saying we'd have these sub-goals that we would have in place, and we would put who's responsible. And then for step 4, staff would receive support and training on meaningful activities. You can't just give them meaningful activities. You're going to have to train staff, you're going to have to coach them, you're going to have to data on that, their use of them, and you're going to have to reinforce their use of the strategies you teach them. So you have action steps under the goal there. So that's an example of an action plan that the PCSC and the team would put together after reviewing the results of the evaluation and deciding some things that they could do that would make a difference in the individual's quality of life, and then developing a system that would help everyone use those strategies consistently. Data on are using those strategies, and then is making things better for Sammy and his quality of life. So some service expectations for teams. So teams that have a consultant come in need to understand that the outside independent consultant is there to provide a non-biased assessment of the situation. And so the team needs to be able to avoid becoming defensive when they have scores as low as the team for Sammy had. Because if there were no problems, then the team would be functioning well and they wouldn't have needed this service. So something that needs to be set up front. Maybe the PCSC helps everyone to understand, look, I'm going to find problems, that's my job. And then we're going to figure out how to solve them. And it's going to be much more helpful if I'm extra critical, not mean, but extra observant about problems versus glossing things over. So I find problems, and we're going to figure out how to solve them. It understands that they're going to be expected to contribute to the plan and addressing ways to improve the situation based on that environmental evaluation. And that they're going to use strategies, and they're going to be troubleshooting why those strategies are not used with the PCSC. If that, and they're going to be helping with the consultant way to incorporate training and monitoring of use of the strategies into their whole way to do business with the agency. And looking at that, is that working? So these expectations for the service teams from the PCSC service. So it's expected that the PCSC does an evaluation of the system, that barriers and quality of life, that they develop with the system strategies that are going to improve and get rid of those barriers, and that they train the system to use those strategies. All of this is going to be documented, so NAC should be able to see the evaluation, the report, the recommendations, and the plan following that. Support the use of that service. And, we should see outcomes that improve quality of life and make things better for staff, and improve the quality of the services that are being provided too, because it's all about making things better for the individuals. That concludes what we have, and this is a time, if you have any questions, to write them into your Q&A box. Any questions of the material that we just presented? All right, so any questions? We were clear as mud. Walmart has a good sale going on. I don't know which it is. So thank you all for your participation, and I hope this helps you to understand the PCSC service, and if you're a service provider, to really make a difference in people's lives by helping the teams to do that are more effective for improving quality for our individuals. Thank you very much.